In Luke's gospel, the Jesus story is always about going toward Jerusalem. And so it has been suggested that calling today's passage the road to Emmaus misses the point. It is actually a story about walking away from Jerusalem. A story not about two people on a mission, but two people walking away from a cause. But Jesus intervenes, and eventually they turn around, and so it becomes a story about the road back to Jerusalem. But the road back to the place where he sweat blood in the garden, and the place where his body was broken on a cross, the road back is also the road less traveled. Before these two disciples make their change their course, and return to Jerusalem, something must happen. So the text says, quote, "It happened that while they were conversing, Jesus drew near and walked with them, but their eyes were prevented from recognizing him." Did you ever notice that there is no physical description of Jesus in the Gospels? His height, his weight, his bearing, the color of his eyes. No, Luke seems to be saying that Cleopas and his companion were unable to recognize him, not because they had forgotten his appearance, but rather had lost sight of the heart of his teaching, that the Messiah must suffer, his body broken, and his blood poured out, a teaching that he anticipated in his final meal among them. When the bread was broken and the wine poured out, he says, "This is my body, broken for you. This is my blood, poured out for you." And he added, "Do this in memory of me," clearly insisting that such breaking oneself open and pouring oneself out, what Paul would later call kenosis, a Greek word which means to self-empty. This kenosis is the sine qua non, the indispensable component of a life of discipleship. To say it another way, in 1933, Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. In 1937, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a Lutheran professor of theology and an outspoken critic of the Führer's genocidal persecution of the Jews, published a book entitled, in its English translation, "The Cost of Discipleship." I've read that the original German text had a one-word title, Nachfolgen, which translates as walking in the footsteps of Jesus. In a single word, we have a clear and unambiguous description of the road to discipleship. To walk as Jesus walked, to live as Jesus lived, to die as Jesus died. And so, yes, the English translation is legitimate, the cost of discipleship. By the way, Bonhoeffer was eventually arrested and was hanged in a Nazi concentration camp, just days before the camp was liberated by American soldiers. But back to the Emmaus story. When Jesus meets the two travelers and he asks what they were talking about, Cleopas and his companion respond with a question. "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there these days?" This in turn leads to a third question. Jesus asks, "What things?" About 30 years ago, I had a wonderful opportunity to have a sabbatical which had two parts. 100 days of Bible study in the Holy Land, or precisely in Bethany, less than 2 miles from the city of Jerusalem. Here, the program was divided into a series of week-long modules, one of which was taught by our own Father Frandorf. Another was taught by a wonderful Christian brother, Joe Schmidt, who once had been principal of West Catholic High School here in Philadelphia. Brother Joe devoted his week to explaining the value of and some of the practical steps in keeping a spiritual journal, which he suggested was an opportunity to record and so open the door to deepening our appreciation of the things, the moments, the particulars in faith's ongoing journey in our personal relationship with the risen Lord. As Catholics, we are blessed with an acceptance of what theologians call the real presence of the Lord in the Eucharist. It is not just a memorial meal to remind us of the words Jesus spoke at the Last Supper, "Do this in memory of me." Rather, this gathering around the book and then the table is making present, here, now, literally, the body and blood of the Lord. For Jesus said, "This is my body. This is my blood." And this gift evokes gratitude, which is why we call it Eucharist, from the Greek word Eucharistein, which simply means to give thanks. It was Thomas Aquinas who suggested that giving praise and thanks is the highest form of praying. Yes, of course, it's okay to petition. Jesus told us to knock on the door, to speak our needs, to pray on behalf of those we love. But Aquinas was right in putting gratitude on the highest rung of the ladder of prayer. So when I taught college students a long time ago, no matter the course, I would look for an opportunity to say, in my experience, a key difference between an adolescent and an adult is that an adolescent often says please, but an adult more often says thank you. And since faith, like life, is a journey, which means this side of heaven we never fully arrive, there is always more to learn, more opportunities to grow, to thank, to give, to love, all that we might better do our part, that the kingdom might come just a little closer this Easter season.